The words hung in the air between them like shards of broken glass, sharp and cutting. She stood by the kitchen counter, her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. From now on, I'll decide when we talk or spend time together. Stop pursuing me. He felt something crack inside his chest, a fracture that had been forming for months finally splitting wide open. For 3 years, he'd been the one reaching out, planning date nights she'd cancel, suggesting conversations she'd dismiss with a wave of her hand. He'd convinced himself it was a phase, that marriage required patience, that love meant persistence. But this was different. This wasn't avoidance or distance. This was a declaration of control, a unilateral restructuring of their relationship where she held all the power and he was left waiting for scraps of attention like a dog begging at the table. "You're serious," he said, his voice hollow. "Completely." She didn't even look at him as she poured her coffee. "I need space. I need to not feel pressured all the time. So from now on, I'll let you know when I'm ready to connect." He wanted to argue, to demand an explanation, to ask when their marriage had become something she needed space from. Instead, he simply nodded. The fight had drained out of him somewhere between her forgotten birthday last month and the anniversary dinner she'd spent scrolling through her phone. "Fine," he said quietly. She blinked, clearly surprised by his acceptance. Perhaps she'd expected him to protest, to negotiate, to beg for exceptions to her new rule. But he was done begging. That night, he slept in the guest room. Not because she asked, but because he chose to. When she knocked on the door at midnight, probably expecting him to open it eagerly, grateful for the attention, he pretended to be asleep. The next morning, he left for work before she woke up. He'd always made her coffee, always left a note, always tried to start the day with some small gesture of affection. Not today. Today, he simply left. At the office, his colleague noticed the change immediately. "You look different," she said, studying his face during their morning briefing. "Just tired," he lied. But it wasn't exhaustion. It was clarity. For the first time in years, he saw his marriage with brutal honesty. He'd been so busy trying to fix it, to bridge the gap between them, that he hadn't stopped to ask himself why he was the only one building the bridge. His phone buzzed during lunch. A text from her, "Dinner tonight." His thumb hovered over the keyboard. The old version of himself would have responded immediately, enthusiastically, grateful for the invitation. But something had shifted. She'd wanted to control when they connected. This was her reaching out on her terms, expecting him to be available, to drop everything, to prove that her new system worked. He put his phone away without responding. By evening, there were 3 more messages, each one slightly more irritated than the last. He read them all but replied to none. When he finally came home at 8, she was waiting in the living room, her expression a mixture of confusion and anger. "I texted you about dinner." "I know," he said, setting his briefcase down. "I was busy." "Busy? Doing what?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the expectation in her eyes. She'd thought her declaration would give her power, that she could withdraw and he'd simply wait, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention she decided to offer. "Working," he said simply. "I had a project to finish." "You could have texted back. You said you'd decide when we spend time together. I assumed that didn't include dinner since you didn't mention it this morning." Her mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected him to take her words literally, to treat her declaration as an actual boundary rather than a manipulation tactic. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He kept his voice calm, almost curious. "Because I'm just trying to respect your wishes." She had no answer. And for the first time, he realized he didn't need one. The following weeks unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance, except only one person knew the steps had changed. He maintained his routine with mechanical precision: wake at 6, gym by 7, office by 8:30, home by 7. He was polite when they crossed paths, cordial even, but the desperate energy that had defined his behavior for years had vanished. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "Are you angry with me?" she asked one evening, cornering him in the hallway as he headed to the guest room, his room now, though they'd never officially discussed it. "No," he said truthfully. Anger required energy, investment, care. What he felt was something closer to numbness, a protective frost that had settled over the parts of him that used to hurt. Then why are you being like this? Like what? Distant. Cold. You barely talk to me anymore. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so sad. I thought that's what you wanted. Space. Control over when we interact. I didn't mean, she stopped, frustration flickering across her face. I didn't mean for you to shut down completely. I'm not shut down. I'm respecting your boundaries. He moved past her, his shoulder barely brushing hers. Good night. Behind him, he heard her sharp intake of breath, the beginning of a protest that died unspoken. He didn't turn around. The guest room had become his sanctuary. He'd moved in his books, his laptop, a small coffee maker. What had started as a temporary retreat had transformed into his personal space, and he found he didn't miss the master bedroom at all. Didn't miss lying awake listening to her breathe, wondering why the person next to him felt like a stranger. Work became his focus. The promotion he'd been putting off pursuing, because it would mean longer hours, less time to try to fix his marriage, suddenly seemed not just feasible but necessary. He stayed late, took on extra projects, volunteered for the presentations others avoided. His supervisor noticed. You've really stepped up lately. The board's impressed. Just doing my job, he replied, but they both knew it was more than that. His colleague, the one who'd first noticed the change in him, invited him to lunch. They talked about work, about industry trends, about nothing particularly important. It was easy, comfortable. No tension, no unspoken resentments, no feeling like he was walking on eggshells. It's nice, she said as they walked back to the office, talking to someone who actually wants to be here. He knew she meant it professionally, but the words struck deeper. When was the last time his wife had wanted to be anywhere with him? At home, his wife's behavior had become increasingly erratic. Some days she'd ignore him completely, validating her original declaration. Other days she'd try to engage him in conversation, cook his favorite meals, suggest they watch a movie together. He participated when invited, but with none of his former enthusiasm. He was pleasant, present, but not pursuing. It was driving her crazy. He could see it in the way she watched him, the way her texts had gone from occasional to frequent, the way she'd started appearing in his doorway at night with transparent excuses. Do you know where the extra towels are? In the hall closet. Where they've always been. Right. Of course. She lingered, clearly wanting something more. He returned to his book. After a moment, she left. His mother called one Sunday. They talked about his sister's new job, his father's retirement plans, the garden his mother was planning. Normal things. Family things. And how's your wife? His mother asked, her tone careful. She's fine. Are you fine? He considered lying, offering the same reassurances he'd given for years. I'm working on it. His mother, wise in the way mothers are, didn't push. You know you can always come home if you need to. The words settled something in him. He had options. He'd been acting like his marriage was a prison with no exit, but it wasn't. He was choosing to stay, for now, but it was a choice. That knowledge changed everything. The next evening, his wife made an announcement. My mother wants us to visit next weekend. Not would you like to visit, or are you free? Just an assumption that he'd go along with whatever she decided. I have plans, he said. What plans? Does it matter? Her face flushed. Yes, it matters. She's expecting both of us. Then you should have asked me before telling her we'd come. He kept his tone even, matter of fact. I'm not available. What's gotten into you? Everything and nothing, he thought. But what he said was, I'm just living my life. Isn't that what you wanted? The dinner invitation arrived on a Tuesday, elegant script on cream-colored cardstock. The company's annual gala, the kind of event he'd always attended alone because his wife found them boring and pretentious. This time, he didn't even mention it to her. When the night arrived, he dressed carefully. The navy suit she'd once said made him look distinguished, the watch his grandfather had left him, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He was adjusting his tie in the guest room mirror when she appeared in the doorway. "Where are you going?" "Company event." She took in his appearance, something shifting in her expression. "I didn't know you had something tonight." "You didn't ask." "I would have come with you." He met her eyes in the mirror. "Since when?" She had no answer. They both knew that for 3 years, she declined every invitation, rolled her eyes at every work function, made him feel guilty for even asking. Now, suddenly, when he'd stopped inviting her, stopped including her in his life, she wanted in. "I'll be late," he said, moving past her. "Don't wait up." The gala was everything he'd forgotten these events could be: energizing, engaging, full of interesting conversations with people who valued his input. His colleague was there with her husband, and they introduced him to others in their field. He found himself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in months. "Your wife couldn't make it?" someone asked politely. "She had other plans," he said, which was true enough. Her plan had been to control when and how they spent time together. This simply wasn't her chosen time. When he arrived home at midnight, every light in the house was on. She was curled on the couch, still dressed, clearly waiting. Her eyes were red. "We need to talk," she said. "It's late." "Now. We need to talk now." He'd never heard that particular note in her voice before, something between desperation and demand. He sat down in the chair across from her, not beside her on the couch. She noticed. "What's happening to us?" she asked. "You tell me. You're the one who set the rules." "I didn't think you'd," she stopped, searching for words. "I didn't think you'd actually stop trying." There it was. The truth beneath her declaration, beneath all the distance she'd created. She'd wanted him to try harder, to prove his devotion by pursuing her despite her rejection. It had been a test, a manipulation, a way to feel powerful and wanted without having to actually participate in the marriage. "What did you think would happen?" he asked. "Did you think I'd just keep chasing you forever? Keep planning things you'd cancel, keep trying to talk to you when you'd shut me down, keep building a relationship alone? I just needed to know you cared. By making you my entire world while you barely acknowledged my existence." He shook his head. "That's not love. That's not even respect. That's just cruelty. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, when's the last time you asked about my day? My work? My life? When's the last time you planned something for us? When's the last time you actually wanted to be with me, not because you felt obligated or wanted to prove you could summon me when it suited you, but because you genuinely enjoyed my company?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know." "Neither do I. And that's the problem." The next morning, he found flowers on his dresser. Expensive ones, the kind from the boutique downtown. The card read, "I'm sorry. Can we start over?" But flowers were easy. Flowers required no change, no self-reflection, no actual effort. Just money and a moment of guilt. He left them where they were. At work, the promotion became official. Director of Strategic Development, a title that came with a corner office and a significant raise. His supervisor shook his hand. "You've earned this. You've been the most focused, dedicated person on the team these past 2 months." 2 months. That's how long it had been since his wife's declaration. 2 months of emotional silence that had somehow become the most professionally productive period of his career. His wife texted, "Congratulations on the promotion. Dinner tonight to celebrate? My treat." He stared at the message. She'd known about the promotion possibility because he'd mentioned it months ago. She'd barely acknowledged it then, had seemed almost annoyed that it might mean less time for him to dedicate to fixing their broken marriage. Now she wanted to celebrate, to be part of this achievement she'd played no role in supporting. He typed, "Thank you. Already have plans with colleagues." This was only partially true. His colleague had mentioned drinks with the team, but he hadn't confirmed. Now he did. The celebration was at an upscale bar downtown. The atmosphere was light, congratulatory, full of people who'd watched his transformation and respected what he'd become. His colleague pulled him aside. "Can I say something that might be overstepping?" "Sure. You seem lighter, happier. Whatever you're doing, it's working." He considered this. Was he happier? Or had he simply stopped being miserable? Maybe there was no difference. When he got home, his wife was waiting again. But this time, her approach was different. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said. You're right. I haven't been fair to you. I haven't been a partner." "Okay. Okay. That's all you have to say." "What do you want me to say?" "That I forgive you. That we can go back to how things were." He sat down, suddenly tired. "I can't go back to being the person who accepts scraps of attention and calls it love." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" She faltered. "I want us to work on this. Together. Real effort, from both of us." Where was this energy 3 years ago? A year ago? 3 months ago? The question hung unanswered, because they both knew the truth. She only wanted to work on the marriage now that he'd stopped working on it alone. The counselor's office smelled like lavender and leather, an odd combination that somehow fit the neutral space designed for conflict resolution. His wife had made the appointment, sent him the confirmation email with a note, "Please. For us." He'd agreed, not because he expected anything to change, but because he wanted to be able to say he'd tried everything. That when this marriage ended, and increasingly, he saw the when rather than if, no one could say he'd given up without exhausting every option. Dr. Sarah Chen was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional. She had them sit in separate chairs, not on the couch together. A small choice, but he appreciated it. "So," Dr. Chen began, "who wants to start?" His wife jumped in immediately, as if she'd been holding her breath. "We've been going through a rough patch. I asked for space, and now he's completely withdrawn. I'm trying to reconnect, but he won't let me in." Dr. Chen turned to him. "Is that accurate?" "It's one perspective. What's yours?" He chose his words carefully. "For 3 years, I was the only person investing in this marriage. I planned, I pursued, I tried. She rejected most of my efforts. Then she explicitly told me to stop, that she'd decide when we interacted. So I stopped. Now that I've built a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for her attention, she's decided she wants that attention back." "I didn't mean it the way he's taking it." "How did you mean it?" Dr. Chen's question was gentle but firm. His wife struggled. "I just needed to feel less pressured. Like I had control." "Control over what?" "Over. When we spent time together. Over the relationship." "I see." Dr. Chen made a note. "And did it work? Did having that control make you feel better?" "At first, yes. But then he stopped trying, and I realized," she stopped, swallowing hard. "I realized I'd made a mistake." Dr. Chen looked at him. "When she stopped pursuing you, how did that feel?" "Honestly, it felt like relief." His wife flinched as if he'd struck her. "Can you elaborate?" Dr. Chen asked. "I'd been carrying the entire weight of our relationship, constantly trying to fix something I couldn't fix alone. When she took herself out of the equation, it was like putting down a heavy backpack I didn't realize was crushing me. I could finally breathe." "That's not," his wife's voice cracked. "You make it sound like I was a burden." "No," he said quietly. "Loving you was never a burden. But loving you alone, trying to have a marriage by myself, begging for the smallest scrap of affection or attention, that was destroying me." Dr. Chen let the silence settle before asking, "What do you want from this marriage now?" He thought about the question, really thought about it. "I want a partner. Someone who's as invested as I am. Someone who doesn't treat my love like it's something to be rationed or controlled. Someone who wants to be with me, not someone I have to convince to acknowledge my existence." "And you?" Dr. Chen turned to his wife. "What do you want?" "I want my husband back. The man who used to plan dates and leave notes and try to make me smile. But do you want him, or do you want the attention he was giving you? Dr. Chen's question was incisive. His wife recoiled. That's not fair. It's not a judgment. It's a question worth examining. There's a difference between wanting someone and wanting what they provide. The session continued for another 40 minutes, circling around the same fundamental truth. His wife had taken his love for granted until it was no longer freely offered. Now she wanted it back. But on what terms? With what changes? In the car afterward, they sat in silence. Finally, she spoke. I do love you. I know I haven't shown it, but I do. Love isn't just a feeling, he said, staring through the windshield. It's actions. It's showing up. It's effort. And I can't remember the last time you showed me love in any way that mattered. I'm showing you now. Because you're losing control. Not because you actually value me. That's not true. Isn't it? Be honest. If I hadn't stopped pursuing you, if I'd kept accepting your breadcrumbs, would you be trying at all? Or would you still be congratulating yourself on training your husband to wait patiently for whatever scraps of attention you felt like giving? She had no answer. That night, he stayed late at the office. There was always work to do, but more than that, there was peace in the silence, in the space where no one expected anything from him except competence. His colleague knocked on his door around 8. You're here late. Could say the same about you. She smiled, leaning against the doorframe. Dinner. There's a new Thai place around the corner. My treat for the new director. It was innocent, just colleagues grabbing food. But as they sat across from each other, talking about everything from project timelines to childhood memories to travel dreams, he realized something. This was what connection felt like. Easy, natural, mutual. No games, no power plays, no feeling like he was performing for scraps of approval. When he got home, his wife was still awake. Where were you? Working. Then dinner with a colleague. Something flashed in her eyes. A colleague. Yes. We grabbed Thai food and talked about work. What colleague? He saw where this was going. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. You're my husband. Then act like I'm your husband. He kept his voice level. You can't ignore me for years, tell me to stop pursuing you, and then get jealous when I have a normal professional relationship with someone who actually enjoys my company. A female colleague. Yes. A married female colleague who was being friendly. Something you might try. The argument escalated from there, both of them saying things they might regret later. Or maybe they wouldn't regret them. Maybe these were truths that needed to surface. You want to know the real problem, he said finally. You only want me when you think someone else might. You only value me when I'm not available. That's not love. That's possession. She slapped him. The shock of it, not the pain, but the act itself, stopped them both cold. I should go, he said quietly. Where? Hotel. My sister's. Does it matter? Please don't leave. But he was already packing a bag. He'd reached his limit, found the boundary he didn't know he had. And once crossed, there was no going back. The hotel room was impersonal and clean, a blank slate that somehow felt more honest than the house he'd left behind. He sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the string of messages from his wife. I'm sorry. Please come home. We can work this out. I didn't mean to hit you. Please. He didn't respond. Instead, he called his sister. It's late, she answered, but her voice was alert. She'd been expecting this call for months. Can I stay with you for a while? Of course. What happened? He told her everything, the years of one-sided effort, the declaration, his withdrawal, the counseling session, the slap. Saying it all out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been when it was just thoughts in his head. You know what you have to do, his sister said gently. I know. Do you need me to say it? No. He did, but he couldn't admit it. I just need to figure out how. You've already started. The hardest part is deciding. The rest is just logistics. They talked until nearly 2 in the morning. His sister offered her spare room, a good divorce attorney, unconditional support. By the time they hung up, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: clarity. The next morning, he went home. Not to stay, but to talk. His wife looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen, makeup less, hair pulled back. She looked younger, more vulnerable than he'd seen her in years. "Can we talk?" she asked. "That's why I'm here." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd made her declaration months ago. Full circle. "I don't want to lose you," she began. "You lost me a long time ago. You're just noticing now. That's not fair. Stop saying that. Stop making this about fairness. This is about reality. And the reality is that we haven't had a real marriage in years. We've had a situation where I loved you and you accepted that love without reciprocating. That's not a marriage. That's a martyrdom." She flinched but didn't argue. Maybe she was finally hearing him. "I take responsibility for my part," he continued. "I should have set boundaries years ago. I should have demanded better instead of accepting less. I enabled this dynamic as much as you created it. So what are you saying?" He'd rehearsed this moment, but now that it was here, the words felt heavier than he'd imagined. "I'm saying I want a divorce." The words hung between them like a death sentence. She'd known they were coming, must have known, but hearing them still hit like a physical blow. "Please," she whispered. "Give me one more chance. Real change this time. I'll go to therapy alone. I'll do whatever it takes. You had chances. Years of them. And you only want to change now that I'm leaving. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. People can change. Some people can. But not because they're backed into a corner. Not because they're losing something. Change has to come from genuine desire to be better, not from fear of consequences." She was crying now, deep sobs that shook her shoulders. A part of him ached to comfort her, the same part that had spent years trying to make her happy. But that part had finally learned, he couldn't fix her, couldn't change her, couldn't love her enough for both of them. "I'm so sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so sorry for everything. I know. And I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm willing to keep putting myself through this." Over the next hour, they talked logistics. The house, the finances, the timeline. It was surprisingly civil, both of them too emotionally exhausted for more fighting. They agreed to mediation, to handling things respectfully, to trying to end this with as much dignity as they'd failed to maintain during it. As he packed more of his belongings, his wife watched from the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Was there someone else? Did you cheat?" "No." The answer was simple, honest. "I didn't leave you for someone else. I left you for myself. For the person I used to be before I lost myself trying to make you love me. I did love you. Maybe. But not enough. And definitely not in the way I needed." He finished packing and turned to face her one last time in the house they'd shared. She looked small, broken, nothing like the cold woman who'd made her declaration months ago. But that's what happened when you pushed someone away successfully. You got exactly what you asked for. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. "I really do. I hope you learn to value someone before they're gone. I hope you figure out that control isn't love and that attention withheld isn't power. I hope the next person you're with doesn't have to lose themselves to make you feel found." "And you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What do you hope for?" He thought about that. "I hope to remember who I am. To rebuild the parts of myself I sacrificed. To find someone who meets me halfway, who doesn't treat my love like a game to be won. Or maybe just to be alone and okay with it. Either way, I'll be better than I was here." He walked out, and this time, he didn't look back. 3 months later, the divorce was final. He'd moved into a downtown apartment, closer to work, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in light he didn't realize he'd been missing. His sister helped him furnish it, practical furniture mixed with pieces that actually reflected his taste, not compromised decisions with someone who'd never really cared about making a home together. Work continued to flourish. The promotion had opened doors he hadn't known existed. He traveled for conferences, spoke on panels, built professional relationships that felt genuine and mutual. His colleague, he'd learned her name was Rebecca, became a real friend. They grabbed lunch, talked shop, occasionally met for weekend coffee with their respective partners. Her husband was a good guy, and watching their relationship reminded him what partnership looked like, two people building something together, neither one carrying the full weight. He dated, cautiously. Nothing serious, just reminders that connection could be easy, that conversation could flow naturally, that someone could look forward to seeing you without it being a power play. He was in no rush. For the first time in years, he was enough on his own. His ex-wife tried to reach out occasionally. An email here, a text there. He kept his responses polite but distant. She wanted closure, wanted to know he'd forgiven her, wanted perhaps to rebuild some kind of friendship. But he'd given her enough years. The rest of his life was his. One evening, sitting in his apartment with a book and a glass of wine, his phone rang. His mother. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" "Good," he said, and realized he meant it. "Really good, actually. You sound different. Lighter." "I feel lighter." They talked about family, about his father's garden, about his sister's upcoming promotion. Normal things. Easy things. And when they hung up, he sat in the silence of his apartment, not lonely silence, but peaceful silence, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like himself. The story of his marriage had ended, but his story was just beginning. And this time, he was writing it alone, on his terms, with no one deciding when he was worthy of attention or love or respect. He was free. And that, finally, was enough.